Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another edition of The Danny Show. I'm your host, Daniel Cody, and this is where I give commentary and reviews on all things wrestling. So before I get started, I want to thank all the viewers and all the subscribers for watching. Let's get started with an on this day review of TLC Tables, Ladders, and Chairs 2010. I cannot cover all of the matches that took place that night, but I can cover some of the ones that I found very interesting. And one of them was a ladder match between Sheamus and recently released star John Morrison, aka Johnny Drip Drip, as we call him now. But those two 10 years ago had an amazing rivalry together that saw Sheamus become King of the Ring in another match at Survivor Series 2010, which I believe Morrison was victorious. But this was the settlement of that match. Not to mention a WWE Championship match, which, um, of course, Sheamus was successful. But this was a settlement rivalry match for the number one contender shot at Mrs. Championship. And it was a match that saw John Morrison be the highlight reel, being Irish whipped into the ladder on the outside but sliding under it. Later on in the early part of the match, we will see Morrison do a corkscrew off the ladder onto Sheamus in the ring. But somehow Sheamus took control of the match, pushing Morrison onto the ground while his leg was stuck on the ladder, and he would use the ladder, Sheamus I'm speaking of, to work on Morrison's leg, and it's a miracle that Morrison didn't get injured in his leg during that match. And it was hilarious when Jerry Lawler said, when Sheamus wakes up, the devil says, "Oh crap." That's hilarious. But either way, despite Sheamus taking control, using the ladder to target Morrison's leg, Johnny Drip Drip comes back and makes some more highlights, driving Sheamus through a ladder, bending it in half, although it would go against his favor. Somehow, Morrison was able to climb the match, but Sheamus, being like the Terminator, would come in and try to stop Morrison from grabbing the contract. Thankfully, as Sheamus pushed Morrison onto the ropes, Morrison used the ropes as leverage to give Sheamus a swinging kick and would settle the rivalry, winning the match and becoming number one contender for the Miz's World Heavyweight Championship match that he won from Randy Orton. Speaking of The Miz and Randy Orton, the next match would feature those two in a tables match. And as it was starting to become later on in late 10, Michael Cole became a huge worshiper of The Miz. Not anymore, but at the time he was a huge Miz worshiper. He worshiped the ground that The Miz walked on. If I'm a How do I say this? I want to sound appropriate, but if The Miz were a woman, Michael Cole would. I might not should say that. Let's just say that if Miz were a woman, she could degrade Michael Cole, and Michael Cole would enjoy it and pay her to in some dungeon or something. But either way, I'm not going to get too much into that. I'm just bringing up a little humor, but I got to keep it a little bit appropriate. But either way, this was a tables match between Randy Orton and The Miz, who accompanied by Alex Riley. And of course, for a second, Randy Orton took control of everything, but Alex kept getting in the way, making sure that Randy Orton couldn't suplex The Miz through the table. And if he ever suplexed him, he would go through the ring. Alex Riley was a bit of a difference maker in the match. And this one particular time, he was trying, Randy I'm speaking of, to powerbomb The Miz through the table, but The Miz countered and took control of that match. And somewhere down the line, Randy Orton tried to get some momentum, but and he ended up RKOing Alex Riley. but The Miz would go for a skull crushing finale and lay Randy Orton on the same table, cracked table, that was cracked when Randy Orton powerbombed Alex Riley through the table. The referee, who was knocked out accidentally, would assume that Randy Orton was the one put through the table. So The Miz won the match, and Jerry Lawler thought it was crooked, and he was right. But Michael Cole was for it. If it's only cheating if you get caught. But either way, I remember when Jim Ross said, "Don't teach your kids that. Teach your kids it's not cheating if you get caught." That's a good lesson to teach children. But either way, the ref caught it and demanded the match restart. And Randy Orton went crazy and destroyed the Miz. But as Miz was thrown into the ring, he shoved Alex onto Randy Orton, and Randy Orton was pushed onto a table, and that would become a fair victory. And Michael Cole would go back to being happy because when the match was restarted, Michael Cole threw a fit. I thought he was gonna bust a vein. I really did. But Miz retains the championship and moves miraculously, surviving the Viper Randy Orton. But moving on. This match was a chairs match between John Cena and Wade Barrett. I apologize. John Cena and Wade Barrett, and I'm afraid I've got some bad news. Because in the early summer of 2010, the Nexus came and wreaked havoc over WWE in disturbing fashion. And Retribution tried to do that in 2020 and failed miserably. And a lot of characters, a lot of wrestlers were ruined. NXT wrestlers were ruined by the Retribution character. Mia Yim and Dominic Dijakovic, to be more specific. Mercedes Martinez thankfully went back to being herself and then went on to TNA, aka Impact Wrestling, to start a rivalry with Mickie James, which was unsuccessful because Mickie James defeated her. But let's backtrack into the thing. Nexus was somewhat successful, unlike Retribution, which was a Nexus wannabe. Nexus wreaked havoc all over WWE and they targeted John Cena. And of course, at Hell in a Cell, Wade Barrett defeated Cena, forcing him to join. And then, because he wouldn't count Barrett to victory, Cena was fired at Survivor Series, which I covered. But now we get here, and it wasn't in the same fashion that Stone Cold Steve Austin got fired, but in certain ways, John Cena terrorized Barrett until he got his job back. And they would face off at TLC in a chairs match with CM Punk on commentary, just like he is on AEW now at times. In the match, we saw a collar and elbow tie up between Cena and Barrett, filling out process before he was Bad News Barrett. Then he would go on, the fight would spill on the outside. Both guys would get a chair and swing at each other like Star Wars. Barrett would take control for a little bit, but Cena would make a comeback, what WWE 2K games would call his signature comeback with the shoulder tackles and the sideplex. Five knuckle shuffle, but the AA was unsuccessful. Barrett would go for a flying elbow with the chair shot, which was unsuccessful, but Cena would go for a flying leg drop to the back of the skull, except this time his signature move was performed with a chair under him. After doing that, Cena would stack some chairs in the middle of the ring for him to give Wade Barrett before he was Bad News Barrett and before him and Beth Phoenix fought each other verbally on NXT commentary. He would go through a bunch of chairs and an attitude adjustment, and Cena would pin him 1, 2, 3. But as the match was victorious for Cena, Cena was not done, and he was hungry for more to get revenge for all the mess that Barrett had put Cena and the WWE through. So Cena decided to swing some more chair shots and lure him to the entranceway, where he would stack him under a board and pull a bunch of chairs, burying him under chairs, and some say it was a burial. I don't think necessarily it was a burial, but if you do, I can completely respect and understand that opinion. But it was a match where he was buried under chairs, and Cena gets his share of justice. So I'm afraid I've got some bad news for Barrett. This other match, and Cena was the main event match, I apologize. But let's talk about another match that took place, and that was Edge versus Kane, World Heavyweight Champion, versus Rey Mysterio versus Alberto Del Rio. Two rivalries and one match. The first rivalry was Mysterio and newcomer Alberto Del Rio, and they had a great rivalry. Also, we have the continuancy of Edge versus Kane, and of course, with the mind games of Paul Bearer as the wild card being postponed, being put to the side. But either way, did Tony talk about a custody battle? He must have been thinking about that ladder match between Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio at SummerSlam 2005, which he announced both parties being on SmackDown at the time also. And also, Rey Mysterio's entrance was dedicated to one of the members of the band Kiss. And of course, we had Del Rio always coming out with nice cars. Edge and Kane would get to the ring. The match did not start traditionally. It was a fatal four way ladder match. No, I apologize. A fatal four way TLC match, which we saw Kane and Edge on the outside with Mysterio and Del Rio starting the match in the ring, and the brawls would continue on both respective rivals. And during the match, Rey Mysterio would climb the rope, the ladder, I apologize, and Del Rio would make a habit of intercepting every climb that Rey Mysterio had in that match, and this was one of them. Except uniquely, Rey Mysterio would be pushed off the ladder but end up diving onto Kane and Edge in a crossbody on the outside. And Rey Mysterio's athleticism and skill in the ring would push Michael Cole, to refer to him as Spider Man. Ironically, we got Spider Man No Way Home coming out. But Rey Mysterio would be referred to as Spider Man, but because he was dressed in black, Matt Stryker, also on commentary with Jerry Lawler, would refer to him as Venom. But either way, the match would continue, and Kane would take control of the match, establishing his dominance for a little bit. But it took an assist from Rey Mysterio for Edge to climb the ladder and body splash Kane through a table, and Rey Mysterio would take advantage again, only to be stopped by Del Rio. Edge would find his way into the ring, spearing both Alberto Del Rio and Rey Mysterio, because it's every man for himself. Rey and Edge being good friends. And Kane would receive his spear on the entranceway, while Rey Mysterio would use the entry tables and slide off of them onto Kane in a high flying move. Once again, Rey tries to go up, Mysterio stops him. No, Del Rio stops him. This time, Del Rio would receive a 619 from Rey Mysterio, but his 619 was countered by Edge's chair. And moving forward, as Edge and Rey fought on the top of the ladder, they would both come tumbling down from the top, and Ricardo, Del Rio's personal ring announcer and assistant, would try to climb the ladder and Kane would stop it, choke slamming him, Del Rio, and Edge, except Edge would go through a table. And so somehow Rey Mysterio is in the ring in 619's Kane, and Del Rio and Rey continue to fight again. Except this time, Del Rio would be pushed by Rey off the ladder onto tables, and that would be the last we saw of Del Rio. Kane would tombstone Rey Mysterio, and that would be the last of Mysterio. Edge would spear Kane through a table, which, by the way, Kane broke the bottom piece of with his anger and his strength. Anger and strength combined is dangerous. But Kane would be speared through that table, and Edge would climb the ladder to win his 10th World Heavyweight Championship. And it's ironic that today Kane, I'm sorry, Edge, and I mentioned earlier The Miz. Edge would become World Heavyweight Champion that night. The Miz was already WWE Raw Champion. And what's ironic about that is I'm talking about it now, and both men are set to face each other at day one on January 1st in my former hometown of Atlanta. Who do you think is going to win that match? Let me know in the comment section below, and let me know what you thought about this event also. But that's all the time I have for you today. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you another time for another review on all things wrestling. And if you haven't already, be sure to check out my triple review, 3 tributes in one video of Stone Cold, Trish Stratus, and the RVD. Both men, both superstars, celebrated their birthday yesterday. And I did a tribute of my favorite matches from both of you. And if you haven't seen it, check that out, as well as my SmackDown review from a couple of days ago. So I'll see you next time. Have a great weekend. Have a great Sunday. See you soon.